Good evening. How are we all doing? So it's quite a sunny day today. I am informed that people may be having barbecues. Also, the snooker is on. But I used to watch snooker a lot and don't anymore. So we're going to be discussing, in terms of the first topic, so the way I'm going to do these is have an initial topic which is pre-planned so that any poor buggers trying to watch this afterwards, where it's not live, instead of bouncing around different topics, we can discuss a thing. And obviously there's elections next week, there's local elections in Wales, Scotland and some bits of England, and there are of course the Stormont elections, which are of course more important in Northern Ireland. So we're going to start off with that basically. Now afterwards, we'll spend 15-20 minutes on that, or however long people want to spend on it. Then I'll go over some more general ones as well, and I've already clipped a few that people asked just before the stream. We'll try and pick up some of those as well. So it's really elections next week. The important note, yeah, I cannot claim credit for this one. But it is sage advice anyway, and sage advice is always worth spreading around. What do I think of the fact Alliance voters are much more likely to transfer to nationalist than unionist parties? Right, so we're starting with Northern Ireland then. That suits me just fine. Where's my Northern Ireland thing? Hold on, let's get rid of that one. I think this is it. No, this is my own fault. There we go. This is my own fault for not actually writing down which one's there. So, John's saying he used to watch snooker years ago. It was peaceful. It was never peaceful when I watched it. But anyway, it's over now. So in terms of the Northern Ireland election, so yes, they use single transferable vote. So when you're looking at polling and trying to work out what may happen, it's a little bit tricky, because you'd also need to know what people's second preference vote is likely to be. But just to have a look at what we maybe can do. So I tried to I've got my pointer as well. So I have a pointer. I've turned my icon into a pointer. So we'll start off with the table on the left. Now this is some polling ahead of next week's Stormont elections. I've seen different polls, and there are differences between them. I don't know which ones are best and which ones aren't. I went for this one because it's Salvation and I've heard of them. Ironically, they're not a polling company I rate, but unfortunately, the other polls I found in various media, I couldn't find out which polling company came up with them. So we'll use this one. So the suggestion here is, in terms of first preference vote share, that the DUP will be on 20.2%. when they were on 28% last time. Sinn Féin, again, they were on 28% last time, and this time it'd be like 22.2. So again, Sinn Féin looking like, on first preferences at the moment, polling a bit ahead of the DUP. But you can see both of them are well down. And, you know, you're saying you don't see Sinn Féin taking that kind of hit. See, that's the thing. I don't know. That's the problem with when it comes to a UK general election. I know which polling companies can be relied upon. When it comes to the Stormont elections, I don't really, because none of them seem to get it quite right. And when it comes to local elections, it's all completely up in the air. So I don't know. But what we can see is from last year. So obviously anything we're looking at for next week is speculation until the results are in. We can have a look at what happened last election, and try and work some things out 5 years ago. So the one in the middle is my little calculation based on first preference votes of, you know, in an attempt to try and see which parties last time got the benefit of second preference votes. So the DUP got 28.1% of first preference votes. That, if it translated directly into seats, if there was no transferable vote, if it was just purely proportional representation, that would have translated into 25 of the 90 seats. They actually got 28, suggesting that they do benefit from second preference votes. Sinn Féin, similar thing. SDLP, slightly. UUP, not so much. They tend to lose out. And I suppose that will be partly because someone, let's say someone who wants to vote along sectarian lines for unionism, may well choose the UUP as their first preference and may choose the DUP as their second preference vote. But many of the people choosing to have the DUP as their first preference, proportionally probably much less likely to choose the UUP, I guess. Isn't Alliance likely to be second choice for mild unionists? Arguably, yes. I mean, well, the way I would look at it in terms of the parties is, obviously, there's going to be lots of factors playing into the elections. Brexit surely has to be a big one. In fact, the DUP are trying to make Brexit a big factor. And, you know, if I were looking at it as someone who'd traditionally voted unionist, if I was in Northern Ireland and I traditionally voted for a unionist party, I'd look at the following situation. I'd say, obviously, I'm not going to be in favour of Sinn Féin. I mean, Sinn Féin and the DUP, for me, are both very harmful to politics, both of them, because they are too ideological. They sacrifice everything, the common good, their own communities, everything for the sake of an ideology. There's no pragmatism at all in either party, really. You know, I'll accept that Sinn Féin, Michelle O'Neill, has steered Sinn Féin into slightly more sensible territory. But still, you know, I just don't find either party being anything other than toxic to politics. But they obviously have very different attitudes towards, say, the Northern Ireland Protocol. Then you've got the UUP. Now, they are trying to be sensible, but they keep finding themselves boxed in by the DUP. So they keep switching from saying, look, the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to stay, and, you know, we just need to work and you know, smooth over the edges, to, oh, the Northern Ireland Protocol is a problem. Granted, they're not going as far as saying we should just unilaterally scrap it. At least I don't think I've seen that. Hi, Max. It's just... Well, you say accept unionist ideology as apartheid. They both are. I mean, at the end of the day, they both are. It's divisive whichever way you look at it. From someone, you know, from someone outside of it completely, who just wants people to be happy. From my point of view, you know, it makes more. See, if you were to ask me what am I in favour of, reunification of Ireland or the status quo, I would say the reunification. Not because I just think it'd be better for whatever political reason, just because partition, if it was ever going to work, hasn't worked. It hasn't. People aren't happy. Whereas I look at it as, if the whole of Ireland had have left 100 years ago, by now the people who were unionists would have got over it. And, you know, it would have, and all of the mess that we've got today would largely have disappeared, because generations would have grown up and there wouldn't have been this weird blurring of lines. We would just have a normal relationship with normal neighbours. Do I not think that Sinn Féin are far more practical than DUP? Yes, I do. But again, it's shades of grey. It's a little bit like, to just segue completely, Neil Parish, the MP who now has resigned for watching porn in the Commons. Do I think that's anywhere near as serious as some of the other offences recently committed by MPs of various parties? No, it's on, I said in the video I just brought out, it's on the bottom end of the scale of unacceptability. But it is still unacceptable. You know, are Sinn Féin more practical than DUP? Yes, absolutely. But two things. First of all, that doesn't necessarily make them a positive force in politics. And second, people have got options. It's not like you've only got the option of the DUP and Sinn Féin. I know that the way it's going to go is Sinn Féin. See, that's the thing as well. All this talk at the moment is Sinn Féin going to become the largest party in Northern Ireland, or will people decide? Because that's the way polling suggests at the moment. Sinn Féin will come out of this as the largest party. Or will people decide that they hate Sinn Féin more than the DUP? Which way is it going to go? And it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't bloody matter. You know, if Sinn Féin become the largest party, assuming the Stormont Assembly can form, because obviously the DUP could scupper it, and they're likely to, Sinn Féin would elect the First Minister, and the DUP would hold the position of the Deputy First Minister. They're the same position. They have different titles. It's not like in a normal political system where the First Minister is actually the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister is their underling, the person who takes over when they're on holiday. The two positions are of equal power. That's the way the Assembly was set up. What bloody difference does it make which one? It's still going to be those two, isn't it? Anyway, what would happen to Unionists in a united Ireland? Would they join the Irish parties? Well, I think that's probably a question for much later on. Who knows? It's tricky, isn't it? Because talking about Sinn Féin again, Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland is a very different beast to Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland, isn't it? Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland is a fairly conservative party. Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland tries to, harvest more of the left-wing votes. They're not even quite the same party. They have quite different policies on a number of important issues, really. But anyway, but in terms of where we are with it, it doesn't make a difference. Going back to the question, which I still haven't answered, would Unionists tend to vote Alliance? All I could say is I think I would. And I think that is reflected in the fact that in this poll, again, you may not think it's all that accurate, and it's only first preference. These percentages on the left here are only first preference votes. It shows the Alliance Party potentially gaining a lot, like from their point of view, about 50% extra first preference votes if this poll is anything like accurate. And obviously a lot can change over the next week with final days campaigning, as it always can. But that would suggest to me there are a lot of people on both sides who maybe just want... I mean, again, I keep saying maybe because I'm just imagining myself in the same situation. I would look at it and think, look, sectarian politics isn't healthy. Sinn Féin and the DUP are the kings of that. The UUP also, to a lesser extent. But still, whereas the Alliance Party... if we could have, the Alliance Party getting a much bigger share, you might find politics normalising. But again, people are still going to... They're still going to see it as the two big parties are going to be the DUP and Sinn Féin. Even if they've got a reduced number of seats each. They're still going to be the... And that's the problem, isn't it? Because people see that, they will naturally just vote that way. And they don't have to. Like... In Westminster elections, people often will say the same thing. Or what if just loads of people voted for the Liberal Democrats, assuming that was a sensible thing to do? I have my own views on that. But let us just say, people will never do that because they understand that in reality, the government will have to be formed from either Labour or the Conservatives. But that is only because you got first past the post. There is no, I'll vote for this party because this is the party I agree with, but to avoid the worst case scenario, because single transferable vote is quite good in that it allows you to vote for the party that most matches your philosophy, but you can also cast a vote to try and make sure that your worst possible option isn't allowed in through the back gate. It's not my preferred. I would just rather total proportional representation. But it's not a bad system. But anyway, hang on. Am I saying that the Tories are not as toxic as DUP or Sinn Féin? No, the Tories are totally toxic. The Tories, I mean, to be fair to Sinn Féin and the DUP, they're not actually splitting up a nation. One of them wants to keep it divided, doesn't want to divide it anymore. The other one wants to unify it. The Tories want to actually explode the whole thing. The Conservative Party, in terms of the membership, like the MPs and so on, the politicians, I would say that even the current Conservatives are less extreme than the DUP. But it doesn't really matter because the headbangers are in charge of the Conservative Party. There's just a load of others on the bus for the ride, but they're not really steering the bus. So the practical impact of the Conservative Party is far more dangerous than the DUP. But you could argue that's just because the DUP don't have as much power. Max there, I really hope the Alliance Party do well. Well, so do I. I mean, ever since the Good Friday Agreement, I have sort of hoped that we would gradually see I think I always viewed it as you could tell the health of Northern Irish politics by how the parties that don't push sectarian divisions do. And while you've got the prominent parties being essentially sectarian parties, there's something not quite working. You know, because there should be no need for those sort of things. Like, I mean, if you take Scottish independence, for example. So if Scotland became independent, yes, the SNP, they wouldn't collapse, they wouldn't disappear up their own arseholes overnight, but over time, there'd be no need for them anymore. They would split up into different parties because that unifying effect of wanting Scottish independence, all of a sudden they'd start to say, okay, well, we've got it now, the unifying policy is gone. Now we disagree on basically everything, and they'll split up into 2 or maybe 3 other parties because the need for the SNP wouldn't exist. You know, if Northern Irish politics is working, there should be no need for the DUP, the UUP, Sinn Féin. What about an atheist party? Well, I also don't want. I mean, I'm religious myself, and I don't want parties who run along religious or anti-religious lines either. Do you know what? I quite like it. A functioning democracy has major political parties that work on this principle. This is what we think is best for the country and its people. And then you have different parties, because at the end of the day, that can be subjective and different people can disagree on that. That's how it should work. If all the parties just have their own ideas about what's best for the country and what's best for the people, that's a functioning democracy. There aren't very many of them in the world. Oh, Wendy, thank you. Mentioned this in another video. What's the likelihood that Russia lost the Scottish referendum, so moved targets to UK, leaving EU instead? Probably 0, because it has been the stated policy of one of Putin's closest advisors years before that to split the UK off from the EU. So they were always working towards that. Obviously, it would have been beneficial for the UK itself to have split up as well. Any division in Europe was to Putin's benefit. But anyway, let's have a look. Oh, well, it's funny you should say that about myself and Maximilian Robespierre. Really enjoyed watching the live stream we did together. Do you think you might collaborate again soon? I don't know. What do you think, Max? We might be doing something very soon, mightn't we? Yes. I will hopefully remember to put it on my banners next week. Right, let's have a look. The Chinese are happy enough with just one party. Yeah. Yeah. You would never have had me down as religious. I really don't see why. The Northern Ireland question, like the Scottish independence question, has yet to be definitively answered. Well, I mean, see, that's the thing as well, isn't it, when it comes to reunification or not of Ireland, okay? And this is why it's nothing to do with me. I won't get a vote in it. You know, it's for other people to decide. But I would just see it as tidier for Ireland to reunify, because the issue will never be settled, will it? If it couldn't be settled in 100 years, generations have grown up with the idea of Northern Ireland. You know, people now in Northern Ireland have grown up in Northern Ireland, unless they moved there. But they've grown up with Northern Ireland being a thing. If it's still this divisive after all this time, then you say to yourself, it's not actually going to be settled, is it? Whereas if Ireland were to reunify and people just grow up, you know, it would have been tidier 100 years ago if partition never happened. By now, I'm convinced by now that would have been the norm, and it would have just been what it was. People would have read in the history books, Ireland left the UK. Some people may have been brought up to believe that it was a mistake. Doesn't matter. It would have still been an established fact. It's where we are. There we go. But it's so yeah, the only way it can be settled, arguably, is for that to happen. But anyway, I remind you of Alistair Campbell for some reason. Oh dear, I don't know if that's good or bad. Here in Worthing, I believe the Conservatives will lose their majority for the first time on the 5th of May. It's level pegging since last Labour came from 1 seat to 17 last year. Right, so shall we move on then? Seeing as we'll probably... we'll move on to the local elections in England, Wales and Scotland then, shall we? Shall we get rid of that? Well, as you've mentioned, the Conservatives... Oh, no, not that one. Shall we have a look at this? So... well, Piccoli's just said that astrophysicists tend to be religious. Scientists tend to be religious. You know, if you can name very famous scientists, they've almost all been religious. And you could argue, yes, but that's because they lived long ago when more people were religious. But again, that's still my point. These people were still able to come up with brilliant discoveries whilst being religious. So this concept that religion somehow, whether right or wrong, impedes scientific thinking. QED, the most brilliant scientific minds in history were almost all religious. Not all actually, but mostly. John, I can't share that comment, but I'll bring it up later. Anyway, sorry. This is a campaign poster for some Conservative candidates. Now, you may well have guessed that they were Conservative candidates because the banners on it are blue. Although it's not, strictly speaking, Conservative blue. It's a similar hue. Although that just may be the photo. It may not be coming out very well. But you will notice on it, it doesn't say they're from the Conservative Party. It doesn't have the Conservative Party logo. Somewhere on it, in small writing, it will have to say that it was funded by the Conservative Party, I suspect. Because it has to somewhere say who paid for it. But they might even keep the Conservative Party off that if they did it locally. But this is what's happening. This is in Wales, but it's happening in England and parts of Scotland as well. You've got Conservative campaign literature going out without the Conservative Party mentioned on the literature and without the logo on it. So it's like they're trying to campaign. They don't see the Conservative Party banner as an electoral asset. Imperial Commissar, thank you. It says, thanks and great insights. Oh, it's gone. Since always, cheers, mate. Oh, thank you. Oh no, we're getting into a religious discussion. I'm going to leave that. But anyway, is there any reason for the elections not taking place in Nottingham? We haven't. Well, I don't know about specifics, other than the fact it's not local elections everywhere. I think there's local elections everywhere in Wales and Scotland. I think they all have them at the same time. In England, it's sort of staggered. So there are local elections in some parts of England, and there'll be more local elections in some parts of England next year, and it just sort of gets it staggers out. So each year you've got some local elections. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I really don't know. I don't think it's a bad thing, if I'm honest. I don't think you necessarily want all your elections all in one go. But the... where was I? Yeah, so next year's, I think, will be more instructive. If I get rid of this and try and put... I've got to remember which one it is now. So, I've already said polling... This is just for England, by the way, not Wales and Scotland. The polling will not tell you which party is likely to do well. But just to point out a couple of things. So you can see on this poll, again, this is via Survation. I don't think it's necessarily the best, but whatever. It is at least comparing with itself back then. So it'll all come out in the wash in terms of who's doing best. So never mind the actual percentages. The point is that Labour are, in this year's local elections, 6 points ahead of where they were in 2018. The Conservatives are also ahead where they were. Remember, Conservatives had a bad one in 2018. So people thinking that the Conservatives could lose a load of council seats this year, if they did, that would be an unmitigated disaster, because this is not like they've only just come to power and they've only just become unpopular. When these same local elections were held 4 years ago, the Conservatives did badly then. Labour did badly as well in some areas, and then they did really well in others. So, you know, it's there are potential Labour gains to be had. There are some parts of London where Labour could gain. There are some parts of the Red Wall where, ironically, Conservatives could gain still. But by and large, I don't think it's going to be brilliant or a disaster for either of them. The Lib Dems, you know, -4 compared with where they were 2018 is a bit worrying, because we'll be hoping that the Lib Dems can make some major gains. But again, you know, you don't always worry about the popular vote, because it's, you know, if you have a load of collaboration and you've got a load of like Labour and Green councillors standing down, or at least not campaigning properly to let the Lib Dems in, and vice versa, and they all sort of help each other out, and there is going to be some collaboration going on, some cooperation where, you know, parties sort of campaign, or sometimes might not even do that, but they'll sort of give a clear run to the one that's best placed to replace the Conservative candidate. Chris Ellis, thank you very much. Keep calm and carry on. I'm frequently calm. And Ethan, thank you as well. Also, a lot advertising them as local Conservatives, a sign of the electoral damage. Johnson's course. Yes, I mean, this is the thing. The Conservative part, like, here's the way politics works, party politics. It's really this simple. What is the advantage in standing on a party's banner? Because if you win, it constrains you. Like, if you stand for Parliament and you stand for whatever party and you win, you go into Parliament or the local council, whatever it is, but in Parliament the spotlight's more on you, and you have to then toe the party line. You can get away with the odd bit of rebellion, depends on the reason, but by and large you've got to toe the party line. That means you have to vote the way your party whips tell you to vote. Now, you'd prefer not to do that. You would prefer to vote the way that you think you should vote each time. So why stand there? The reason why you stand under the party banner is because they will help you get elected. Their party machine will help you get elected. You don't believe that you would get elected otherwise. Now, if you have a situation, this is really serious, if you've got a situation where the Conservative Party, a huge party in this country, if you are a local councillor or a candidate and you do not think that saying you are the Conservative Party candidate is an electoral boost, that is a shocking indictment. That is that, because you are basically trying to stand as an independent without actually standing as an independent, because you'd have to leave the party then. Or it's the way of trying to get the best of both worlds, so that the actual, the real Conservatives, the loyal Conservatives, will know you're the Conservative candidate because your leaflet's in blue. Oh yeah, that's the Conservative. I know that's the Conservative Party, but other people are not aware, and they might actually tick your box. Jonas, oh, thank you very much, blimey. Is it only media brainwash that makes so many Brits say never vote Labour? Because they aren't really very far to the left if you look across Europe. No, indeed, they're not. Yes, it is. The media ultimately is incredibly influential. Incredibly influential. I cannot even begin to describe. Just like even the thing with the Starmer thing, which I'll have to talk about again tomorrow because they've added a load more lies into that. You know, and it's even people who don't really read these papers will see the headline. Like, for example, my partner was talking to her ex's mother on Friday, yesterday. And this person, who's a reasonable person, she doesn't pay attention to politics in the news and stuff like that, but she's a reasonable person, and she's not a fan of Boris Johnson or anyone like that. But she has still come across these Daily Mail headlines, and she now thinks exactly what the headlines are designed to make you think. Oh, they're all as bad as each other, aren't they? They're all up to it. It's like, no, they're not. And the thing is, you can go to someone and you can explain it to them individually, but unfortunately you can't do it to millions of people. The Daily Mail can get their headlines seen even if people aren't buying the paper. And remember, their stories are all online as well. They can have their headlines seen by millions of people, whether it be via social media shares, people just walking past the newsstand, whatever. You know, they can get millions of people to see those headlines, and they won't read the article. They don't need to, and that's potentially very destructive. And certainly the drip effect of it over many years is very destructive. Oh, David, thank you very much, David Downey. Have I ever considered the pros and cons of a party-free democracy, all candidates independent? Yes, I have, many times. I've often actually, this is how sad I am, tried to think of systems, and I won't be best placed to come up with an actual system, where it would sort of work. And the problem is you basically find yourself, it doesn't work. Because, well, no, I tell you what I came up with, my best idea for a party-free system. Essentially, you want this. The way the party machine works, if you think about how it works by convincing you to vote for some bugger you don't know. Now, this person might be a right arsehole, or they might be the hardest working, kindest person you've ever met, right? How do you know? You don't know. You're voting, what the party machine is like trying to win you over. So the only solution is that everyone who is elected must be elected by someone who knows them personally, and they know what they're like, and they know whether they'll be good or not. So how do you do that? You obviously, how many people can realistically know their local candidate? A couple of thousand at most. Now, obviously, you cannot have tens or hundreds of thousands of MPs. So how do this work? I would think of like a hierarchy. So let's say you have a tiered system of elections. So let's say you have a parish, well, we have parish councils, but I mean a meaningful one. So within a town or part of a town, or maybe a group of villagers, you have a parish council, which works and has like powers in the local area. So you vote for your parish council, your parish councillor, your local one. And this might be a group of 2,000 electors, okay? And they sit on the parish council. So then the parish council elects a leader from amongst their ranks. So you don't vote for the parish council leader, but they do, the other parish councillors do. So you know your parish councillor because they live in your local area. You voted for them. They vote for the parish council leader. The parish council leader sits on a larger council, like a county council or something. And again, that county council elects a leader and maybe a few others to sit on a national senate. Depending on the size, obviously, the bigger the county, the more seats they get. So every time you've got someone being voted for, they're being voted for by people who know them personally. And it also means you've got a chain. So like an MP at the moment, if you've got a real problem with them, if you don't think they're doing their job, you can go and complain to them. No one will listen to you because the complaint gets diluted in this massive constituency. So what you can do instead is it's like, no, there's only like 2,000 people. No, if you're not happy with your parish councillor, there's 2,000 people. You just go knocking on the doors. Do you know what they've done? Do you know what they're refusing to do? They're refusing to help me with this problem of mine. And you all know each other, nice community spirit, and they'll give him hell or her hell. Same thing if you don't like something the county council's doing, you go to your parish council, you represent us, we don't like this. And if they're outnumbered, fine. But that parish councillor will have to show those electors that they are trying their best to represent them. That's the best system I could come up with. And my system encourages polarisation. Logically, you'll not end up with a government with popular support. No, you won't. No, you won't. So you'd have to have a completely different attitude to have the way the executive forms as well. You're absolutely right about that. Absolutely right. I didn't say this was a brilliant system and we should do it. What I said is it's the best system I could come up with that removes the need for that removes the party machine, because the party machine would be way less effective, arguably not effective at all. But I can't know that. That's just me saying it. Big issue is if you have a system based fully on representatives, you don't get proportional representation. A minority view will get 0% representation. Well, again, but like I say, the way the executive forms cannot work in the same way, because if you remove the party system, you remove our model for a government. And I say our model, I mean the whole of Europe's, because any sort of parliamentary democracy elects effectively the executive. It's not like in America where it's completely separate. You have an executive that is voted for separately to the legislature. I mean, maybe you could do that. You could arguably do that. Have a separate executive that's voted for separately, like in America. I don't know. I'm not academically qualified to be able to really come up with different systems of government. But, the party system, although I am a part of it, I'm a part of it because I accept it needs to be. It's it's not good. It's just that if the party system has to exist, I'm pragmatic. Which party am I going to help propel to power? But anyway, even the father of the house is now worried in Worthing as Labour are taking over big time. Well, okay, so here's the thing now. Let me just get rid of this and we'll put this one back on. So now that Neil Parish has resigned, we're actually in a weird situation. Has this ever, I don't think this has ever happened before. It may have done. But technically MPs can't resign. Oh, gone blurry. Technically MPs can't resign. What you have to do is you have to write to the Treasury. You do this weird thing. I always forget the name of it because it's hardly ever used. And it has the same effect. But I don't think we've ever had a situation where two MPs have done it at the same time. So Imran Ahmed Khan, who was the Wakefield, well, he still technically is the Wakefield MP. He took age. Said he was going to resign and didn't. He has now resigned. He was waiting to get all of his April pay, basically. So he waited till the end of the month, so he got paid for April. So we've got two MPs resign. That will now mean 2 by-elections, and they'll be on the same day. There's no reason for them not to be on the same date. Now, here's the thing. Wakefield, obviously, Labour need to push very, very hard. Very, very hard. The other one, it's one of these weird rural names. I can't remember. It's like 2 bits of a place put together. I'll have to learn the name of it, but I have forgotten at the moment. But I had a look at it, and it's very much like North Shropshire. I don't just mean because it's rural. I mean in that, in the last election, Labour came second, but a distant second. But the Liberal Democrats weren't that far behind Labour. And it's one of those where you look at it and you'll think to yourself, the Liberal Democrats will be the best place to go for that one. It'll be one of these things where people say, well, Labour came second, so Labour should actually push for that one as well. And it'll be like, well, 2 reasons why not. First of all, they need to focus on Wakefield, not a safe Tory seat. But second of all, it's like North Shropshire. Labour may have come second, but those Conservative voters in that constituency will not flip to Labour. But they might flip to the Lib Dems. So we could, and I don't, Tiverton and Honiton, thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Phil. We could get a situation, bear in mind, this Tiverton and Honiton, I had a look, it's a safe Tory seat, but it is not as safe as North Shropshire was. And North Shropshire's gone. And why did North Shropshire go? Because Boris Johnson is still in charge of the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson is still in charge of the Conservative Party, and now he's a criminal. He's a confirmed criminal. So yeah, it could be a very interesting day. I am going to do a video on it because it draws into something else as well. The prospect. I mean, those by-elections might both go the Conservatives' way. Boris Johnson gets a boost. But Labour might take Wakefield and the Lib Dems might take the place I've already forgotten. Tiverton and Honiton. And you might think to yourself, that'd be bad news for Boris Johnson. But it might not. It could work in his favour. Mark R, thank you very much. Those being Cardiff's councillors, example Jane, let me put it back up so we know who we're talking about. Is it this one? There we go. That's it. Those are the ones you're talking about. Are funny. Lots of blue, but no mention of Welsh Conservatives. Well, exactly. This is the point. I don't know if you've just joined. Exactly, isn't it? It's on blue, so it's sort of dog whistling to the true blue Conservative voters. Again, it could be, I said at the time, it could be the camera. It doesn't quite look like Conservative blue. It's not quite Conservative blue, but that could just be the camera here. But yeah, they don't say Conservative Party. They don't have the logo. It's Parish's wife said she could not believe it. It was nice and normal. I would not find looking at porn massively strange in males, but in the house apartment it's very bizarre. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's not at all odd. But at the same time, it is very odd to do it surrounded by other people, because there's 2 norms he's breaching. There's first of all the social norm. Just in general, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't even do it on the bus or in a park. You could be sat on a bench in a park, not breaking any laws there as far as I know. But you still wouldn't do it if people could, if people were around you. But you also wouldn't do it in the workplace because that's unprofessional. So he was breaching both social and professional norms by doing it. That's what's not normal. Oh, hold on. Have I missed a linked comment somewhere? Maybe. I don't know. But I have just seen a comment saying something like, and I've lost it again now. No, but it's one of those you'd get a warning for. So if you're talking about if you did this at work, you'd get a warning type thing. It might depend, actually. It might depend. I'll tell you something as a teacher. If I'd have been watching it and a load of students came in and caught me, I don't think I'd have got a warning. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't think I would have got a warning. And that's the thing as well. I can understand in like a normal clerical office-based thing, you get caught doing it, you might get a warning. Sure, great. There are professions where you wouldn't. And being an MP, you are supposed to be beyond reproach. But we're having to reproach an awful lot of our MPs. And I do have a lot of sympathy with MPs in that, you know, they might give up a career and you can say they can go back to the career, but it's not easy to immediately go into a job. You could become an MP and you could lose your job within a year maybe. And you know, it's all down to the whim of the government in terms of when the elections are held and all the rest of it. You could lose your job quite quickly, and then where are you? You ain't got a job, and maybe, you know, you don't have a load of money to fall back on. So I have a certain amount of sympathy for the unreliable nature of the career. At the same time, you have to be, in all realistic senses, whiter than white. You have to set an example. You're supposed to be like leading the country. But anyway, is it bad when I heard an MP was watching porn in the comments? I thought Boris Johnson would be accused of that. No, even Boris Johnson, not that, because that's it as well. It's also really stupid. But you're talking about Boris. I mean, there were, what was it today? I haven't prepared this in advance, but there were a load of newspaper headlines going, Boris goes to jail. Obviously, they mean Boris Becker. And other people going, oh, wrong Boris. Wrong Boris. Was this all a setup because MPs want Boris gone? No, I'll tell you what this is, though. Someone pointed this out. It's a very good way of looking at it. Arguably, the fact that Neil Parish has now had to resign. First of all, the reason he's had to resign so quickly is because Boris Johnson can't be asked to save him. Neil Parish was not exactly a loyal Boris Johnson supporter, shall we say. I don't know that he was one of the ones that's put his letter in. I don't think he's one of the ones who's publicly called for Boris Johnson to go. He may have done, I don't know, I haven't checked. But I don't recall his name coming up in that context. But he's not a loyal Boris Johnson supporter either. So I think that has cost him Johnson's support. Although, to be fair, Johnson's support generally doesn't cover very much these days, does it? Ryan there, I'm supposed to vote next week, but the flyers are a bit silly this year. Green Party wants to solve homelessness, housing shortage, crime and discrimination. Sounds good, I guess, realistic. Well, solving them all, arguably not, although homelessness can be quite easily. Whether an individual council really has the funds to deal with it, I suppose it depends on the level of homelessness in the area. They could do. A single councillor, however, no. That doesn't mean to say, though, that you shouldn't vote on those bases, because at the end of the day, a whole gaggle of councillors can affect change, and each one can only be, each voter can only vote for a single councillor anyway. So, you do your bit, don't you? I don't know what it's like in the UK, but US politicians complain that they spend large parts of their days fundraising. It's required to keep their jobs, so politics are their whole life. It's not that bad in this country. We haven't got the situation. But at the same time, there is a lot of fundraising has to be done. In fact, to be an MP costs you... I was reading something recent on the stats on it. To actually just stand for Parliament costs a lot of money. Now, you think to yourself, so how have we ever got people from poor backgrounds being MPs? They have to be comped by others. The actual cost of running for Parliament, it's not just the deposit. It's everything else that goes with it. And if your local constituency party cannot raise the funds necessary, there's an awful lot of hands dipping into pockets to do it. So that's why when you look at like, why are so many MPs from richer backgrounds in any party, it's because to actually stand for Parliament, there's a lot of money has to go into the campaign. And the local constituency party probably can't raise anywhere near that much money. It can't do it with its normal fundraising. So you have to ask a small number of wealthier donors to help out. And the obvious one to do is, if you've got a candidate who themselves can stump up 10 or 15 grand or 20 grand or something, then you do that. You know, if you want to stand as an MP, if you've got 20 grand you can afford to chuck at it, win or lose, then okay, you can be our candidate. That might be how it has to work. Milkshake there. Maybe Johnson was concerned the affair could leave a nasty stain. Yes, very good. Anyway. I'm just trying to find, well, I'm trying to find the thread on here now. Is the porn thing really a useful distraction? We're not talking about the lack of food in supermarkets or the massive rise in utility prices. No, not from that point of view, no. At the end of the day, people who are experiencing the severe cost of living rise are not going to be distracted by someone watching tractor porn. They're really not. You know, it doesn't matter what's being discussed in the news or the general media. People who go to a supermarket and are trying to work out how they can feed themselves, and it's going to be a struggle, they are focused on that. So people going to the polls who are struggling with the cost of living, that's what they're focusing on. How they see the best way to use their vote is a completely different matter, but anyone who is stuck and having to cut back because of the rising costs, that's what they're people are always focused on their own problems. Paul Bow, thank you. Will I set up YouTube membership at any point? Yes. Tomorrow, in fact. Yeah, so I probably should do a word about that one. I'll tell you what I need to do. Let me have a look. Hold on. Uno momento, I think. Right, so this is the checklist of things I have to do. Set up memberships offer. I've done that. You won't see it yet because it's not launched. Upload badges and emoji. You're not getting any emoji, but there are badges uploaded. Done. Announce your memberships. This isn't it, but that's easy. Post to welcome new members. So I have to do some sort of video or message for new members. I have to work on that. I should probably type something out tonight and record it tomorrow. So at some point tomorrow, memberships will go live, because Wednesday's live stream is going to be only for the second tier of member. Next Saturday's live stream will be public, but it will only be members of both tiers, or either tier I should say, who will be able to post it. Sorry, I was having a sneaky little look at how many viewers there are here, and I think the snooker's nicking all my viewers because it's fewer than both Wednesday and last Saturday. Or maybe it's the barbecues. Sorry. So tomorrow. But so I don't expect it first thing or anything like that. It will certainly not be first thing. It may be quite late on if I forget, but it will be at some point. Anyway, Paris just splashed out the new phone too. Oh, these jokes are absolutely terrible. Right. Anyway, I need to read them properly first. Let's find a comment that we can actually... I think anyone earning under £30,000, and that's a generous margin, will notice costs going through the... Yes, I do. And 30,000 is about the median income in this country as well. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I would argue that someone on the median average of 30,000 will have to cut back. And I think they'll have to go. I don't think it's going to be a simple, oh, we probably can't afford as good a holiday this year. I think they're going to have to sit down with a pen and paper, or maybe Excel on a computer. And I think a lot of people don't really look at their outgoings. As long as they've developed some sort of like system whereby at the end of the month they've got money left. Okay, hopefully most people are able to put aside a little bit for emergencies, because emergencies happen, but it sort of works out. I think we've got millions of people at the moment going through every single transaction on their bank statements and trying to work out what they can cut. And I think people on 30,000, it depends where you are in the country as well. So now obviously in my neck of the woods, or even further north, £30,000 is not terrible, but you know, at the same time the food costs the same, the energy costs the same, everything else costs the same. Your cost of accommodation is cheaper. Everything else is the same though, isn't it? So and because you know the actual rise in the cost of energy is so enormous, and the rise in the cost of food is significant. Yes. Median household disposable income in the UK was 31,400 in financial year ending. Blah, blah. That's not disposable. That's just, it shouldn't say disposable. That's absolutely not the median. The median will be that gross. Median income in the UK 24,000. That may be what it is after taxes. Because if you were on about 31,000, you may be left with no, you won't be left with quite 24,000. But I'm pretty sure it is 31,000-ish. About 30,000, I seem to remember. Would be interested to see what the mode income bracket would be. Well, it depends how you work out the brackets as well, doesn't it? But it's like anything else. I mean, inevitably, the modal one is very, very likely to be minimum wage. Or maybe even no wage income at all. Wouldn't it be better to do the live stream on Sunday rather than Saturday? Fewer people out in the pub and so on. Maybe at some point. The issue there is I do a stream on a Sunday, which is for Patreon. I've been doing the stream on Patreon for several years. There is, in theory, at some point, it depends how it is. There are some people on Patreon who you would think, you know, will just come over and do the YouTube memberships, but there are some people on Patreon who don't want to do that, and they'd rather stay on Patreon. So as far as I'm concerned, if people want to do that and there are enough people to keep the stream running on the Patreon Sunday, then that's what I will do. But in the future, because it may not be sustainable, in fact I would struggle to believe it could be sustainable, it may well be that I have to stop Patreon and close that down, and we just end up with a choice of which one would be better. But for now, yes, Saturday is the day it needs to be. Let's have a look. Last 7 minutes. At the end of the last stream, it said people don't fly to work unless very rich, which I tried but failed to correct. As a consultant, I used to fly a lot for work. Did you? Okay. Isn't a consultant fairly wealthy? I don't know that too many consultants are on like £30,000-40,000 a year. I think you're getting screwed over if you are. I live in London, now permanently disabled, have to live on PIP and UC. Yeah, so again, like when you look at when people are thinking, you know, how do you manage stuff like that? A lot of people think of it through their own experiences. I have the experience of having to have lived on, it wasn't universal credit then, it was job seekers allowance, being unemployed, but in the North Midlands, where it is a lot cheap. London, of course, is the absolute killer. I do not understand how anyone can afford to live in London. I say anyone, I mean anyone that's not actually on a ridiculous amount of money. I cannot understand how anyone can realistically, on a modest or worse income, manage in London. But the further north you go, the easier it is. Fraser. Phil, Norway and Spain and other countries have a lot more councils than England, Scotland, and power is at a very local level. Yes. I mean, localising power, again, the problem is when you centralise power, they'll talk about, oh, you can do things more efficient. It's like, well, you can't really. But you do increase the chances of autocracy. Because even if it's not an actual autocracy, all you have to do is you just have to convince people that don't know you and don't know really what you're doing that a thing is a good idea. Whereas, yes, if you localize more power, it's much harder to do that. It's not impossible, but it is, because con artists are con artists, right? But it is much harder. Depends on what you consult on. I did IT, so medium range, not broke, but not wealthy as well. Well, I suppose we might have to get into what the definition of wealthy as well, maybe. Joy, I pay via Patreon. Do I have to pay via membership as well? I really wouldn't. No, I would choose one. I would choose one. Yeah, oh, sorry. There's a 60-second delay on this, so I may have already explained that. But there we go. How do I keep myself happy or sane when diving into this depressing stuff all day for a living? Well, I take breaks. So in the evening, I do other things. I do actually glance through social media as well. You have to keep. I mean, I might have mentioned this in a recent video. What depresses me most of all is not so much like in this country, the specific case, the Conservatives and what they're doing, because that's just what they do. What depresses me is knowing that a majority are not in favour of it, but that the majority will not work together. That's what depresses me. When I see people who say that they are anti-conservative, not just that they don't approve of the Conservatives or they have a preference that's not the Conservatives, specifically they claim that they're anti-conservative, and yet they won't oppose them by getting behind the only credible alternative, whatever that credible alternative is in their area. Okay, that's what gets me. When we've got, and we know who they are, certain media outlets especially, who will spend more time bashing the alternative to the Tories. And I don't mean criticising. Criticising should happen. I criticise and I'll keep criticising. And do you know what? If we get rid of the Conservatives in the next government and we have a different government, a Labour government with whatever, I'll criticise them as well then. The criticisms will go up because my expectations in opposition are quite simple. Win power. One thing. That's all I want them to do. You know, don't matter how much I disagree with what they say or what they do, are you on the path to power? If you are, okay, do whatever. In government, I have rather higher expectations. But, you know, you've got these media outlets that say they're anti-conservative and they spend more time trying to turn people off voting for the alternative. That's not anti-conservative. That's conservative enabling. But anyway, never mind. Teaching assistant, my income is not enough now, especially with gas and tax rises. No modern society should have full-time workers not being able to afford the home. No, certainly no advanced economy. No wealthy economy. One of the richest countries in the world. The amount of wealth, the amount of extra wealth even per year that this country generates is absolutely enough to make sure that everyone can have a decent standard of living. You know, someone was saying recently again, I mean, this goes right back to Marx. I mean, this isn't a new idea. This goes back a long time. Possibly even predates Karl Marx. And they were saying, you know, automation, for example, shouldn't be seen as costing people their jobs. It should be seen as giving people more leisure time, because what should happen is, with more automation, instead of getting rid of half your workers, you should reduce your workers' hours by half, but keep them on their full-time wage. And so on. So you go from doing 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week. More automation, from 20 hours a week to 10 hours a week. Get into a position where people are doing 10 hours a week work, this is in the far future with much more automation, but still on their full-time income and an adequate full-time income. And we can do that. We just choose to allow people to become super rich. I'm okay with the idea of people becoming wealthy, you know, the captains of industry and so on. You know, you can't just portion it all out equally, because then you argue, because at the end of the day, we are naturally capitalist. We don't have to agree with capitalism or like it, but we have to accept it. It's just like, you know, we don't have to like cancer, but we have to accept that if you smoke, you're going to get cancer, or you're very likely to. So, but you can have a situation where you say, look, mate, you're making enough. You've got a comfortable life. You don't need all that money. You're not doing anything with it, right? So we can have a situation where it is distributed much more fairly, but we don't, do we? Because we're persuaded to vote in the favour of corporate and billionaire interests because the billionaires buy up the media and then feed our heads full of crap. But anyway, we have, I'm afraid, run out of time on that last little rant. So yes, thank you for coming, everyone. I will, as I say, put the I'll just mention quickly there, Byline Times is hardly enough for the Conservative. Byline Times is absolutely superb publication. That's proper journalism, but there are too few in the industry nowadays. But we'll leave that there. So there, where will be memberships will go out tomorrow at some point when I've both done the last things I need to do for it and remember. And so then the first live stream for second tier member will be on Wednesday, so other people won't see that. There will be another one on Saturday, but not as many people will be up. But then I can't read all the comments anyway, so there'll still probably be too many comments to read. We will see. We'll see how it goes. We're going to keep playing it by ear. But thanks very much anyway, and have a good evening, everyone.